All right, ladies and gents, welcome to today's video. This is part 2. I hope you enjoyed part 1. This is where we're going to be covering how to go from $50,000 to $100,000 per month. Not necessarily the how, but more so the principles, the mental models, the lessons that we've learned from going through this process and crossing this bridge, more or less, okay? So first of all, this is different than yesterday's video. We kind of have just one phase. There's not really any crazy different phases between 50 to 100. Again, keep in mind that the territory is not the map. This is a representation of how we scaled in our agency, and this is nowhere near going to be how it's going to be like, what it's going to be like for you, because every agency is so different. So it's the territory is not the map, and this is the map. All right. So with that being said, the phase that we're in here is very much centered around culture, talent, and systems. Okay. And the question that I want to start off with here and kind of give you the idea of where this is going is the major question you're going to be asking, you should be asking yourself through this 50 to 100,000 is constantly, how can you or how can I help my team self-actualize? Role mastery, right? How can my team be able to help them master their role? And basically maximize themselves in the role that they're in. Now, when I say maximize themselves, I'm primarily specifically referencing to account managers or account executives in your company who they might be managing $10,000 a month worth of revenue, but they could be managing $25,000 to $30,000 per month worth of revenue, depending on their position, depending on their role, depending on how long they've been at the company, but getting them to maximize the performance and the output of their role and their energy put into the company. And in doing so, it helps them master their role. It helps them increase their pay. It helps them advance to the next stage or become even more important or more valuable asset in the company. And so this is what you want to be asking yourself. How can I help my team self-actualize and basically master the role that they're in so they can advance to whatever the next role might be, etc. So the mindset shift happens because where you are kind of from 0 to 50, you're more so centered, at least this was, again, for myself, more so centered around how I can maximize myself. As I said here, maximize my own potential to try to, basically get the most out of me. However, what you need to do is shift to thinking, how can I get the most out of our team? Therefore, the mindset is, shifts from self-centered to helping other people, primarily your team, okay? And that's the only way that your entity or your organization is going to grow, is for you, or at least someone on your team, it needs to be someone, and it should probably be you, to be carefully thinking about, who is hired, what seat they're sitting in, what their strengths are, how their strengths can be fully leveraged, and making sure that you're doing your best to continue to keep a great environment that will allow them to become the best version of themselves. Because if you have a bad environment, a toxic, bureaucratic, extreme lack of transparency type environment, no one's going to excel. No one's going to ever become the best version of themselves. So you need to have a good environment. So, ladies and gents, these are all the different kind of more valuable traits that I wanted to present to you. 90 to 95 to 100% of your time should be OTB. There's going to be a point where you need to release all clients, in my opinion, and just go 100% working on the business and not servicing clients. The reason why there's a 5% gap here is because, to a certain extent, someone in your leadership needs to absolutely be managing accounts, because if not, they'll lose touch with the systems and the processes. They'll lose touch with the service itself, and you can't have everyone losing at the highest level, losing touch. Doing so, I think, will extremely kind of destroy and hurt the agency in the long term. So make sure that if you're going to go 100% OTB, you have someone who you would consider a potential partner or is a partner in the agency that would either be on leadership or has potential to be on leadership, and make sure that they also have accounts, and at least 5-10% of their time is going to account management type work, in the business type work. Okay, so EQ at this stage is vital. This may not be too helpful of a point. It's a pretty general point, but just EQ is so important, and this is like culture vision. EQ, having a high EQ, is the ability to kind of see how people are feeling and performing in the environment, more or less. So emotional intelligence, really just, it becomes so valuable because a giant agency, as you scale 50 to 100,000 a month, I mean, you're going to have a lot of people. And unless you have a very extreme agency, but it doesn't matter. At some point, it becomes very people intensive, and that happens very quickly when it comes to an agency, because this is a service-based business model that requires a lot of humans to be able to scale. Now that's both very beautiful, but it's also a double-edged sword. It can be very chaotic if you don't have a high EQ and you can't be able to kind of feel people out emotionally. Because if someone doesn't feel good emotionally in the company because it's bureaucratic, it's a toxic culture, there's someone on the team that's causing issues, that's causing drama, well, maybe they don't feel comfortable telling you because that's just the environment that they stepped into. And so they'll leave you after 1 to 2 years and they may not say anything. Now, investing into helping your team self-maximize, we just talked about that. I mean, that's huge. That's really the center of what's going on here, is helping your team self-actualize / self-maximize in their role. Now, outlining traits of an ideal account executive or account manager is also very important. So you kind of want to get clear on, okay, hey, we've hired a couple account executives or a couple account managers. Again, I focus on this role because this is a very key role within our agency. Remember, the territory is not the map. Maybe for you, the key role is a designer, a project manager. I don't know who the key role may be, but it's someone that you tend to need to hire more of because there's such a key role to the function of the agency. For us, it's an account manager / account executive. The only difference between those two, the way that we've kind of somewhat classified as account managers, someone who's fairly new. They more or less have maybe less than 2 years experience with Amazon advertising, because that's what we do. An account executive is someone with more experience, but there's more to it than that. Account executives generally will have higher MRRs. They'll manage more revenue, so they'll manage over $25,000 per month. And account managers will generally be managing less than that. So with that being said, you want to get clear on what are the ideal traits of this key person in your agency that you're going to constantly need to be hiring for. The key traits can be simply laid out into a Google Doc, but you just need to have it there, because when you're going to hire someone, it's very crucial to just say that, hey, we're missing this trait, this trait, this trait. For us, an important trait that we kind of realized as we scaled was the ability to multitask. It's very important because you're managing not one client, you're managing 5, 10 clients, potentially 12, 13. And so your ability to be able to manage your own time and multitask and be able to prioritize is super important. There's personality tests that can tell you how good someone is at that. And that's not something we ever really looked at or vetted for, but it's one example of a trait that we've learned. And so you've discovered these gems, you organize them into something like Trello or Asana or a simple Google Doc or Notion, and you just organize this information. And so that's a really important point. OBM is open book management. I highly recommend it. I think that open book management is a clear, bold statement of transparency. It's something that you can very easily do. Most companies don't do it. It doesn't mean you go all the way as to showing your salaries of every single person. That's probably the only thing we don't really show, but everything else is shown. Anyone at any time has a link that they can go into Pop and see how much cash we have in the bank. They can see what our profit margin was last month or any year. They can go in and they can see what accounts each person is managing and how much they're managing. Everything is wide open when it comes to financials and what each person is managing within the agency, at least for account managers and account executives. Okay, so open book management is very important. I highly recommend it. It just shows that you care about transparency, and it also holds you as the founder very much accountable. For the first couple years of Better AMS, I was just pulling out an insane amount of cash, reinvesting into things that were not bringing back a solid return. And had I been running on OBM, I probably wouldn't have been doing that. Had I been thinking more long term, had I had a vision and a mission, these things wouldn't have necessarily happened. So meet in person is very important. If you're a remote agency, you need to meet in person. Hold on, let me take a sip of water. It's just so different, man. When you meet your team, I mean, we're about to go on a retreat with our team at Better AMS. We're going to go to Mexico. There's about 6 or 7 of us going there. And half the team I haven't met, because half of them we hired pretty much in 2020, which is kind of funny. This year has been tremendous scale, and that's fantastic. But the fact that when you meet your team, it's just the level of camaraderie, the level of bond, the level of just mastermind and ability to trust someone goes through the roof, and you just learn so much about your team. So maybe it's not always good things that you learn, but it's good that you're learning things that may not be good, because it can tell you if it's a good decision to continue working with them. I've never been in that situation per se, but there are moments that will never happen virtually that happen in person that will either make you look at this person and think, wow, this person's so much more amazing than I thought, or think the opposite. Regardless, the idea of meeting in person is primarily to continue to build a closer team that trusts one another more, and becomes more transparent and more bonded, because in doing so, you're going to have a much better outcome when it comes to working with people. You enjoy the process more. You're going to get better results. People are going to stay longer because they've actually met you. When you haven't met someone, it's pretty easy to just turn in and say, hey, I'm leaving. But when you've met people and you've bonded with them, you've gone to dinner with them, you've had real life experiences, random cool things have happened, it creates a level of bond that glues the team together, which is very important in an agency, because the biggest thing that's going to set you back is losing your freaking people, okay? It's not losing your clients, it's losing your people. That comes before losing your clients, in my opinion. So meeting in person, if you have the money, if you have the time, which you should at 50 to 100,000 a month, I recommend you do it at least once a year. I would love to do it in Better AMS twice a year, to be honest, because I think once a year is not really a whole lot. Now, strategic resource allocation, this becomes more important because you start to get more cash in the bank. You start to be profiting more. When you're doing 10, 20,000 a month, or and you have decent margins, 40, 50, potentially as high as 70%, you might be profiting, around 8, 9, 10,000 at that stage, but then you go to like 30, 35, and if you're in an extreme scale, your margins are probably going to be in the 20 to 35% range if you're really trying to scale. And so 20 to 35% at 25,000, 20%, you're looking at 5,000. At 35%, you're looking at around 7,000, 8,000. So it's not that much, but when you get up to 100 and your profit margins are 35, 40%, you got 35, 40 grand a month coming in profit. And if your runway is in a good position where you've already got 12, 18 months of runway being, if all expenses stayed the same and revenue went to zero, how long could you continue to pay out your payroll and all your expenses? That's extreme runway. That's how I like to calculate it. If you've already got 12 to 18 months of runway and you're stacking up cash, and you're going to need to think about strategic resource allocation, resources being primarily finances, but it also goes into energy and time of the team, which we'll get into in a second here. But let's focus on resources in the sense of cash. Now, one of the things that we've primarily looked at is, one, we're going to do a team retreat at the end of the year. Yeah, the team retreat's probably going to cost 15, maybe up to 20 grand. Probably it's going to be about 20 grand. But at the end of the day, that's going to build so much camaraderie, so much bondness, and there's going to be so many great ideas that come out of it that's 20 grand is very well spent, okay, in my opinion. Even though it hasn't even happened yet, but I'm certain that it's going to be very well spent, because we've had offsites with the team, and it's just pretty much the same. So that's an example of resource allocation. Another one might be you want to start testing ads. Another one might be you need to hire a more of a biz dev, someone that's going to work OTB, not ITB, someone that's not going to come into the business and start managing client revenue, but they're going to be working on other things like a developer. This is someone who you may not see an ROI from revenue-wise in the immediate 6 to 12 months, but 18 to 24 months down the road, it's a fantastic decision. So you're thinking in your head, can we stomach the ability to pay a developer $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month for the next 12 months without seeing an ROI? These are the questions that you're going to go through is, okay, how can we better leverage these resources that we have? Because ultimately, once you've hit 12 to 18 months of runway, I don't think you should continue stacking up a ridiculous amount of cash. It's still good to continue to stack up and make profits. However, you can be a little bit more risky and bold and lenient with your profit margins, and you could push it down to 5-10% if you really wanted to, and it wouldn't be a big deal because, again, you have a solid runway in the bank. So strategic resource allocation from the concept of time is, when you're doing 100,000 a month, you're likely going to have a solid team, assuming you've built your agency properly. I mean, again, the territory is not the map. I know some people who are doing 70, 80, 90, $100,000 a month, done for you services, strictly done for you, and they got 2 or 3 people, and they're freaking maxed out of their minds, and they're freaking out all the time because they have no time, and they're burning out because they haven't hired people. And so, you can't sustain, everyone being maxed out all the time, you're going to need to hire people and push your margins down at some point. Now, if you have, as I said, if you have kind of scaled your agency properly and you've balanced the process of profit margins and hiring people, well, you should probably at this point will have around $100,000 a month. You'll probably have at least 7 people minimum on your team, I would guess. Okay, I would guess. Again, territory's not the map. We have about 13, 14. 6 of those people are onshore. The rest are offshore. I believe 6 or 7. I've talked about the difference between them. I'm not going to explain it right now. But the point is that now we have all of this energy from different humans, and to sit down and think about, how can we best leverage the time and the energy of all the humans that are on this team? You got to think about that, because at the end of the day, you as the agency owner are going to have a level of perspective and context that a newly hired person is never going to have. Okay, if you've been at this agency for 4 to 5 years, the level of context and knowledge of the agency and the vision and the ability to make long-term decisions, yours is going to be so exponentially 100 times greater than someone who is just hired. Assuming that person isn't like a giant, like an agency growth expert that scaled their own agency 5 years ago from 0 to $100 million in 5 years. I mean, like that would be the only case, but that would likely never happen. That person would be charging well over 7 figures a year for trying to hire them. But the point is that you need to sit down and think, okay, where should all the time go from our team? One of the things that we really enjoyed, that we really think is a good long-term investment, is anybody that we bring on, we tell them like, hey, look, what's got us to where we are, what's been a major piece of getting us to where we are is putting out content. And so, we think it's important that you also do this. And here's how, we can kind of guide you through the process if you need some help, or coach you through it, etc. And we'll buy these tools to help you jumpstart your network, all this stuff. And so that's an example of like, okay, a strategic resource allocation where we're thinking about what would be the best thing for our team to invest time into. This is the thoughts that you need to have. OTB, okay, I'm speaking OTB. OTB being on the business, things that they're doing to grow their business. ITB is, things where you're running the day-to-day, you're managing clients, you're doing deliverables, etc. ITB is extremely important. One is not necessarily better than the other per se within a certain context, but OTB-wise, strategic time resource allocation is going to be a very important thing to think about. So right person, right seat. This is the last thing, is make sure whenever you're hiring someone, you hire the right person. That's like a good hire, someone that matches your culture, someone that has the skills, someone that has the strengths that you need, and of course the right seat, meaning you need to put that person in the right position, okay? If this person has exponential experience working with big name, household name brands, and you're giving them little small brands when you could be giving them bigger brands, they're not in the right seat, okay? If this is a person who generally does better working with a smaller set of clients, because they are like really good at laser focus, and they can manage 3 to 4 really big accounts, but they can't really successfully manage 13 accounts because that just like blows their mind, and they're not really, their personality does not allow them to do extreme multitask. That's kind of how I operate personally. Well, then don't put them in the position where they need to manage 13 clients. And these are things that you learn as time goes on with a high EQ, talking to your team, making sure that you have an environment that makes them feel comfortable to be able to come to you and tell you things like, hey, I don't feel comfortable managing this many clients. Can you help me figure out a situation where I can, still bring the same amount of value to the agency but manage less clients because I feel too spread thin. Those are conversations that you need to be able to build an environment to allow your team to be able to come to you and feel comfortable saying things like that. Because for me, I know personally from playing sports at a decent level, I used to play soccer/football, and I would never want to go to the coach and tell the coach like, hey, I just don't feel comfortable running sprints today and working my ass off at practice. Do you mind if I just sit off while everyone else, runs their freaking face off and pretty much burns to death? Well, the coach is going to probably look at me and think I'm, crazy or whatever, but and he's going to tell me to just do the sprints. And I don't want to be the person that goes to the coach and has to say that. But, if the coach has done a good job of balancing, standards with radical transparency and openness and understandingness, if that's even a word. Understandingness is not a word, but then he can maybe say, okay, well, why are you feeling like this? Well, I just had went to sleep at 4 a.m., blah, 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 etc. Okay, as long as the person comes to you with some logic as to why they would like a change within their role, that's a great conversation to have, and you need to be able to make sure that the environment allows such a conversation to even be brought up, because most people probably wouldn't feel comfortable saying things like that. Again, from speaking from experience, I would never go to the coach and tell him I don't want to run sprints. I would just run sprints and do as the coach told me. However, you don't really want that in your company, okay? Maybe in sports it's okay. So that's pretty much it, guys. 50 to 100,000, all right? No phases like last video. It's just pretty much one phase. Let me know your thoughts on this. Hopefully this was helpful. Oh yeah, hey, last thing I didn't touch on this was when it comes to shifting your mindset from maximizing your full potential and focusing on yourself versus focusing on your team. Here's some examples of that. So your salary is important, because if you just want to grow this damn agency so that you can pay yourself as much as possible and live the most lavish lifestyle possible, that's an example of you trying to maximize yourself, right? This is what you want. It's not in the highest and best interest of the team for you to pay yourself more and more and more and more and more and just keep living a better and better and better and better, more lavish lifestyle. But you're doing it anyways. That's self-centeredness. You're thinking about yourself and not thinking about the team in the long term. Another one is your level of commitment to the agency. I know some founders, I've seen some agency owners who just don't work that hard. They want to work 10, 20 hours a week. That's their decision. There's nothing wrong with that. But in my opinion, that is not as good as a leader who's going to work 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 plus hours per week. Think about the kind of leader that you would want if you were working in an agency. Would you want a leader who's chilling on the beach half the week while you're relentlessly trying to grow this agency? Or are you going to want a leader who is working even more than you 24/7 constantly, and they care about this thing more than anyone else? You're probably going to want the latter, okay? So that's another example of like shifting your mindset, thinking about the team, right? Your standards. Again, your standards kind of reflects within your commitment, but your standards are also very important, because if you have low standards for the agency and you're just happy with where you are and you don't really see a future for the agency and the growth of the agency, well, that's not very exciting. That's not really in the highest and best interest of your team. Who do you think, what kind of company would you want to work for? Do you want to work for a company that has a future, or do you want to work for a company that's just going to continue to try to perform at the level that they're performing? I would hate to work at a company that doesn't want to grow. I think personally, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so, I feel very strongly about that. If you want to lead an agency that is just going to coast at 100,000 a month for the rest of its life, I would never want to work with you. And to be honest with you, if that's your standards, you're going to attract people who want to get into a job where they can just do the same thing, get paid, go stop work at 4 p.m. There's a good example. Someone I listened to said, he calls them 459ers. And this is the kind of person who is looking at the clock. They're thinking, okay, it's 4:55, 4:57, 4:58, 4:59. Okay, I'm just gonna, and they're out the door right before the 8-hour mark hits, even though they're being paid full time. That's the kind of people you're going to attract if you don't really want to grow your agency, in my opinion, or if you're just terrible at hiring. But either way, your standards are very important. Are you working 4 hours? Are you working 2 hours? Do you hold people to high standards? Do you have a vision for the future of this agency? If you don't, well, you're going to attract people that likely aren't going to help you grow, and they're a reflection of you. Again, your agency is very much a reflection of you, so just keep that in mind. The mirror is very real. The last thing is your projects. So, thinking about shifting from self-actualization and self-centeredness and trying to master yourself to trying to help your team master themselves, which is also a form of mastering yourself as a leader in the agency. But your projects, where are you spending your time? Okay, it kind of changes. If you're thinking about what can I do to help myself grow the most in this moment, is a different question and will lead to different answers opposed to what can I do to help my team the most, thus help the agency the most, etc. Generally speaking, helping the team out is going to be way more higher leverage than trying to do something for yourself, because again, the nature of an agency is a very people-intensive business. So there's a threshold where you, at a certain point, start to become irrelevant. Your actions start to become irrelevant in the sense that you can no longer take this agency from $100,000 to $1 million a month by yourself. It's going to be the people in the agency that do that, okay? And so you're not going to be able to single-handedly do that. That's impossible, never going to happen. The sooner you realize that, the better. And with that realization comes the realization that for you to get your agency from $100,000 a month to $1 million a month, it doesn't happen by thinking about what you can do with your time to try to maximize out Facebook ads or sign 100 clients, etc. It comes primarily from thinking about what you can do for your team and for their time, and how you can help them become the best version of themselves. Don't get me wrong, you're still a very important piece of the agency. All I'm saying here is that for you to 10x your agency, 2x your agency, 3x your agency, it comes from your team. It does not come from you. And so you got to think about it from the lens of people and team and using other people, and developing them and making sure that they can become the best version of themselves. So ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today's video. I'm losing my voice, but with that being said, if you enjoyed this presentation, this YouTube video, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button. The only thing I ask from you is you hit the subscribe button. Helps the channel, kind of gives me a little bit of motivation. There's a little IV plugged in my arm every time I see that subscriber count going up. It's like dopamine hitting my brain. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the sub button, and much love, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.